All right. So let me know in the chat as you come in whether or not the issue seems to have been resolved. If not, I think I know what the issue might be, and I will get it fixed. So I'll just wait for people to come in and let me know. Let's see. I don't want to get started until I know whether the issue is resolved. Sitting around waiting. Yeah, so I turned off the stream and then I restarted it. So it's in sync. Great. So it wasn't the issue that I thought. So that means I don't know what the problem was, but okay, so we got it resolved. So I guess what I'll do is maybe, I don't know. I guess I'll just, this is a weird way to start. So I guess I'll try to stitch the two together because now I'm starting by talking about an issue where people that start the video are going to have no idea what I'm talking about. I don't know how to do that. I guess we'll figure it out. Okay, so welcome everybody. So yeah, I guess I'll just get started. So, oh yeah, so James Apperson is saying sound and sync are good, but sometimes slightly desyncs and then it catches back up. Yeah, who knows? Okay. Wait, are you saying it's doing it in this video or is it doing it, or are you just talking in general terms? Oof. I don't like having to start and then have to troubleshoot technical issues. Well, it'll give me an incentive to start doing more video editing because I don't want to keep all this in a thing for people to watch later. So I'm going to need some more feedback from given what you said, James. Is it still desyncing? Okay, so I think that is a potential issue. Okay, so one person saying okay, one person saying I'm not. So I just got some kind of, oh, okay, well, yeah, no, the thing that I thought might be an issue. So I was trying to put it in 1080 because I've always been doing it in 720 and maybe that could have been causing an issue. I don't know. Okay, everybody says it's okay. So I will deal with this later and we will just get started. Okay, so, and I will work on the video editing end of things to put the previous beginning together with this one. So it'll give me the homework of figuring out how to do that. Hopefully it's not too difficult. All right, so where we were last time is that we were talking about this particular blog post. And just to get you caught up, basically, I make several general remarks about Moorean moves. And I should also, hold on. The topic really is about consciousness. And that what the blog post is doing is I'm reviewing a paper where a Kammerer is responding to a Moorean argument in favor of phenomenal consciousness, basically an anti-illusionist type of position, which basically holds that it's obvious that we have phenomenal consciousness. Now, to give even more context, one of the major disputes in philosophy of mind and the sort of central dispute in philosophy of consciousness is the nature of consciousness. Is there such a thing? And if so, what is the nature of it? Now, probably most philosophers would say, well, of course, there's such a thing as consciousness. And the only question is what it is. A big part of that dispute centers on the dispute between people that believe that there are qualia or phenomenal states and people that don't. Now, a lot of people that think that there are qualia or phenomenal states might think that the alternative position is so ridiculous, is so implausible, is so outrageous, it's not even worth taking seriously. And so the real dispute really centers on, this hard problem of consciousness, how we account for, the very thing that illusionists and others that reject phenomenal consciousness, the very thing that they're going to say, yeah, we don't even think there is anything like that from the outset. Now, it's actually a little challenging for me to tell you, because if you say, okay, but what are qualia? What is phenomenal consciousness? I don't think there's an answer to that because I think that those terms are actually meaningless. Now, they can be used in meaningful ways, in theoretically neutral ways. Sometimes people just say, okay, but by qualia, I just mean subjective experience. And everybody believes that. Of course you have subjective experience. But this is exactly the problem. There is both that theoretically more neutral incarnation of the term or usage of the term. And then there's these more theory-laden ones where there's all these extra properties that are either explicitly incorporated into one's notion of qualia or phenomenal states, or are implied or leveraged or smuggled in through the back door. So typically, if you ask people, what are you talking about? What do you mean by phenomenal state or qualia. What people will say is that there's a certain qualitative nature to our experiences. And there's something it's like. This is a common phrase, the what it's likeness of an experience. There's something that's like to see red, or to taste chocolate, or to view a sunset, or to feel happiness or sadness or pain or suffering. That our experiences are not just reducible to these third personal descriptive characterizations that could be cashed out in purely scientific terms, but that there's something fundamentally ineffable and private about our experiences. And for many people, because this qualitative aspect of our experience is ineffable, it's not accessible in third personal terms, it falls outside the bounds of what we could achieve through conventional scientific or empirical inquiry. We just can't really get a handle on consciousness by doing empirical research or describing it in third person terms. Now, this is a very attractive conclusion for philosophers to come to when they're more rationalistically inclined and they're less sympathetic towards empirical or empiricist approaches. They want to have that kind of autonomous subject matter that is like, this is a task for philosophy. It's not a task for science. You know, if philosophy is just sort of cannibalized by biology and physics and all these other disciplines, philosophers will feel like we have nothing left. And so this is a sort of last redoubt for, you know, philosophers, one of them at least, to say this is ours. You can't have it, science. So there's a strong, I think, bias in favor of views of the nature of consciousness that are scientifically inaccessible, which isn't to say that that's the primary motivation for people to believe that consciousness can or is characterized this way. That could just be a consequence of people that genuinely are like, no, it really just is this way. It seems this way. I think it's this way. So, you know, there's the famous stuff like Nagel's What It's Like to Be a Bat. And, you know, part of the notion behind this view of consciousness is that there's something about the nature of our experiences that you're just not going to be able to cash out in, for instance, quantitative terms. So when you add up all the traits that consciousness is supposed to have that's outside the bounds of what could be cashed out in functional terms or descriptive terms, third personal terms, you're left with this leftover set of characteristics. And it's, you know, basically, if you describe everything there is that could be described about seeing red, there's still going to be this residue. And that residue is, and that's not, well, I'm making, that sounds a little rhetorical because I'm saying residue, like it's making it seem like it's not significant. But it's what's left over when you account for everything in every other way in all these third personal terms. You have something left over, something that can't be cashed out in relational terms or descriptive terms. And, you know, so basically, you know, I go with the characterization of qualia that you would see in Dan Dennett's paper, Quining Qualia, which is very roughly, let's see if I could get the main properties. It is ineffable. Like, in a certain sense, you can't communicate it. You can't say, here's what the redness of red is like. You couldn't explain it to someone that doesn't have access to it. It can't be articulated. And this is part of the motivation behind like Mary's room, this thought experiment where Mary is raised. Mary's a color scientist that's raised in a room where there's no red, and she never sees red her entire life. And then the question is, you know, and she knows every physical third personal fact, descriptive fact about red. When Mary leaves that room and sees red for the first time, the question is, does she learn something new? And if the answer is yes, that's supposed to be an indication that there's something about seeing red that you really couldn't capture in these third personal terms. So that first part, there's something ineffable about it, but it's non-relational. It's also immediately apprehensible in consciousness. It's not, you don't like infer qualia, you just have direct access to qualia. And then I guess you could say like these properties they're intrinsic properties, they're private properties. And so they have this distinctive cluster of properties. And I guess you could say that they're qualitative, although I don't know if Dennett actually uses that in the list. There's like a standard 4 or 5 characteristics. And so this is what I am claiming. I don't think there is anything like that. And I actually don't think the notion of such a thing is meaningful. For me, it's like someone saying, what other whole numbers are there between 1 and 5 or something like that, other than 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? Like there aren't any others. Wait, I don't actually know enough mathematics to know if I just said something really stupid. So I guess I would want to say something like, you know, I think on my view, once you describe all the third personal things there are to say about consciousness, in principle, there isn't any residue. There isn't anything left over. There just wouldn't be anything else to cover besides those things. Once you've explained basically all the third personal scientific empirical stuff, there isn't anything left to explain. And so it's a sort of explanatorily closed, like our non-qualia or non-phenomenal state accounts of consciousness. And I don't really think that people that think that there are qualia or phenomenal states know what they're talking about. It's just there's just not anything further to say. So I don't simply think that qualia don't exist. I actually think that people that claim that there are such a thing literally are saying nothing meaningful at all. So, okay, so I see a few people in the comments, but also give me 1 second, and I'm going to check the comments, but give me 1 second. All right. Okay, we should be good. Let's see. I saw a bunch of people pop in with comments pretty quickly. All right. So James Apperson says, I don't normally like a word like, quote, obvious on any issue where there's disagreement, because then I just feel like I'm negating someone else's intuitions based on my own. Yeah, a lot of philosophers, though, don't see a problem with that, especially when it comes to the question of consciousness. What you'll see is a lot of people just outright ridiculing illusion. So actually, I keep using this term illusionism. And if you didn't see the last stream, you're not going to know what I'm talking about. So illusionism is the view essentially that people are subject to a kind of user illusion that is characterized by this perspective, this particular way of interfacing with the world. It seems to us like all of our sensory experience and everything that's going on happens in this sort of simultaneous center of experience, which, it's like this theater. It's you can imagine yourself sitting inside your head like that movie. What's that movie with all the different emotions? So it's almost like there's a little version of you sitting inside your mind, viewing the world in like full sensory. It's like it's not just a movie screen, but just all of it, and it's all happening at once. And we have the sense, for instance, that when you look out on your field of view, that your peripheral vision is richly detailed. It's full color, that you're hearing and seeing things simultaneously, that it's all happening in this particular like field of experience, and that it has all these qualities to it. There's this redness, there's this blueness, there's certain qualitative features of sounds and tastes and sights. And in a certain sense, they're all kind of like sui generis. They all are their own thing, and they can't be recharacterized in other terms. They're in a certain sense like sort of fundamentally qualitative. So you experience this simultaneous, fundamentally qualitative interface with reality. And a lot of people that would favor such a view would say, this is the most obvious thing that there could possibly be. Nothing, like maybe there is no external world. Maybe numbers don't exist. Maybe moral facts don't exist. Maybe tables and trees don't exist. But there's one thing, if there's one thing you could know, it's that you are conscious and you are having these experiences that you take yourself to be having. Now, proponents of illusionism will say, they don't have to say you're not conscious or you don't have experiences, because that can be interpreted in ways that an illusionist isn't actually endorsing. What an illusionist will hold is that there are certain ways of characterizing the nature of our experience, that it is characterized by phenomenality or these phenomenal states, that you have qualia, that when you see red, in addition to all the functional and relational and describable characteristics, that there's a redness to the red. That is what illusionists are denying. There's no redness to red. There's no painness to pain. There's no chocolatiness to chocolate. There are none of these intrinsic, private, essential qualities to our experiences. That is not what's actually going on. That doesn't mean nothing is going on. And so the idea here is that we think we're experiencing the world in a way that carries certain sorts of metaphysical and epistemic and other sorts of implications. And we're wrong about those theoretical features of what we think our experiences are like. Now, there's a difference between the illusion of this sort of user illusion and the sort of philosophical mistake of intellectualizing that into certain metaphysical and epistemological and other sorts of commitments. And the illusionism, you could say people are subject to the former illusion without necessarily being subject to the latter illusion, because, of course, at least I would say, it's obvious to me that, a substantial, possibly majority, but at least many people without substantive training in philosophy don't necessarily have substantive, explicit, articulable philosophical commitments. They may have some inchoate philosophical views, but in many cases, I think at least, that they don't have any at all. Part of the reason, by the way, I'm making a point of saying obvious to me, is to critique philosophers who go around saying something's intuitive or counterintuitive or obvious or not obvious or self-evident. I really don't like that phrasing. And I think we really need to get into the habit of criticizing that, because philosophers will just say, well, it's intuitive. What the hell does that mean? Intuitive to who? To you personally? What kind of claim are you making? Philosophers people need to be criticizing them every time they do this, to say it's intuitive or it's obvious or whatever. And they don't say to me or to most philosophers or to most people in general, that sort of thing. And when they say stuff like most people think, they should recognize that that's an empirical claim. And when they say it's the common sense view, they should be clear on what they mean by that and why they think that that's true. A lot of times you'll see philosophers say something is common sense, and it's just, how do they know? But that's a topic I've been over many times. So I've said a little bit about illusionism. Now, sometimes people will criticize illusionism and they'll say what I take to be really bad criticisms, like, well, you can't even observe an illusion unless you're having experiences. So obviously illusionism is really stupid and self-defeating. This is goofy on a number of levels. On one level, it's just goofy to criticize a philosophical view by a superficial, overly literal reading of the name of the view. Sometimes people do this with moral anti-realism too, is they'll say, well, you're an anti-realist, you don't think morality is real. That is, okay, I usually pull punches. I'm not going to pull punches. That is a fucking stupid criticism of anti-realism, and it needs to not just be rejected, but ridiculed. It's stupid, because it depends on what you mean by real or not real. Anti-realists didn't choose, or at least I didn't choose the name anti-realism. I inherit the name other people in the field came up with. If the name ends up being misleading or confusing or whatever, that's not my fault. So, it's kind of just ridiculous to say, well, it's in the name anti-real, so you are against it being real, so you don't think morality is real. What do you mean I don't think morality is real? What do you mean by morality? Do you think I think people don't make moral judgments, or there are no moral systems? So I would be like totally baffled if we went to this, like, I don't know, we went to a religious community and they said, hey, here's our moral system. And I go, whoa, no. I'm a moral anti-realist. You don't have one of those. And they're like, okay, but we have this rule against murder, and we have a rule against lying and stealing. So we have all these rules, and these are moral rules. And I go, no, those don't exist. You don't have those. They'd be like, okay, but like, we do though, because like we punish people that commit these things. And no, you don't do any of that. Morality's not real. I'm an anti-realist. That's ridiculous. When anti-realism is simply the view that there are no stance-independent moral facts. It's not the view that there's no such thing as moral judgment or moral systems or moral institutions or moral values or moral psychology. It doesn't reject any of that. And those are all real. So I think as a moral anti-realist that morality is real. In fact, what I do think is real, the things I think are real may or may not be things that that realists may reject. Basically, as an anti-realist, I actually think morality is real, and that I have a correct conception of what is real, and that it's realists that are committed to thinking morality is some other thing that doesn't exist, or at best, if you're a naturalist, that I think exists in a trivial way. But we could at least say of non-naturalists, I think the thing that they think exists doesn't exist. So in a certain sense, I think at least some moral realists believe in things that I think don't exist, and I actually believe in things that do exist. So who's the realist? Like, should I call myself a really real realist? Or, I think that things really exist. Now, Dennett talks about, I forget the name, but a magician that talks about the use of the term magic. And what's funny is, so this magician, I forget their name, but I've mentioned them in a couple blog posts. They were writing a book on magic, and I think it was a book on like magician, like illusionism type stuff. Like, the balls on the cups type of thing, and people like appearing to saw a person in half and pull rabbits out of hats, like magician stuff. Now, that person could go around saying, and they did, like, I'm writing a book on magic, and people will say like real magic. Now, what is real magic? Real magic is like Harry Potter magic, like, what's the term? Expecto Patronum. I'm trying to see if I could remember some of the spells. So like here's the funny thing though. Harry Potter magic, that's like real magic, right? Well, it's real in one sense. So you could have the sense that real magic would be magic that's actually supernatural, and magician magic is like fake magic because it's not really supernatural. So in that sense, Harry Potter magic is real and magician magic is not real. Okay, but like which one of these actually exists? Obviously, Harry Potter magic doesn't really exist, but magicians really do, like, pull rabbits out of hats and stuff. And so in that sense, it's like actual magic. And so in that sense, you could say, like, I think consciousness, there actually is consciousness. I just don't believe in the type of consciousness that people that believe in phenomenal, like, I don't think there's phenomenal consciousness. I think that is a conceptual confusion about the nature of consciousness. So I don't accept the view that as an illusionist, or holding a view, a qualia quietist, a view adjacent to illusionism, that I don't believe in consciousness. I do believe in consciousness. I think it's people that reject my view or views similar to it that believe in something that it's not even that it doesn't exist. It's literally just nonsense. And so, okay, so they don't believe in what consciousness really is, and I do. So I could say I believe in actual consciousness. And I could say the same thing about morality. I believe in actual morality, not the fake, hocus pocus morality that I think realists, at least non-naturalist realists, believe in. So there's some kind of rhetorical problem with the way in which these philosophical positions are framed, that views that fall in the more skeptical or empiricist or basically views that reject a bunch of metaphysical bullshit. These views are depicted as being like anti and against, and saying it's not real. And it's not so much that these views necessarily hold that the things in question aren't real. You could be some kind of like really hardcore moral nihilist and say, yeah, morality is just straight up not real or whatever, even though I still think that would carry really goofy connotations. It's not so much that these views think that the things in question, at least they're not committed to thinking that the things in question aren't real. It's that they take, in many cases, a more metaphysically cautious approach, or metaphysically less committed approach, or sparse approach, or more empiricist approach, or maybe a more instrumentalist or pragmatist approach. And these views are all characterized in a way that makes them sound unappealing, often because people vacillate between the reading where it's like, okay, I reject phenomenal consciousness, I reject stance-independent normativity, that sort of thing. But it doesn't mean I reject that there are norms. It doesn't mean I deny that things are good. It doesn't mean that I think people don't have. I don't think people don't have experiences. And I don't like this. I don't like that we have ceded the dialectical like framing ground to the more metaphysically committed positions, because those positions have, in part, in virtue just of the names themselves, but also in terms of we're sort of letting them treat their own super metaphysically committed views of the world as some sort of default against which we are reacting. And I never entered the study of consciousness with the default position being, from my perspective, this idea of qualia. It sounds like hocus pocus, sounds like magic. It sounds ridiculous. I would have started with the assumption, yeah, science can eventually account for consciousness, just like it's accounted for life and everything else. I wouldn't have entered the study of consciousness thinking that there's this special stuff that just you can never account for with all the science in the world. You'll never touch it. It's special. Well, I don't start with that assumption. I start with the assumption, no, we could tackle this like science has tackled everything else. It's in a certain sense almost like philosophy of the gaps. Philosophers really want their special little turf that you can't touch with science. And they could, let's just say that they're right. That's not my starting assumption. So I am not obliged when I enter the philosophical discussion to presume that there's some sort of privileged priority or default in favor of the view that I actually think is less plausible. And yet, the people that favor these views, phenomenal consciousness, will go around acting like their view has some kind of priority. Well, most of us think this. Yeah, most of the people that self-selected into a discipline that sees itself in contradistinction to and autonomous from the sciences, or at least many people in the field do. Oh, wow. I'm really impressed by that. Do you think most scientists working on consciousness are going to agree with you? I doubt it. Maybe they would, but just The point is they treat themselves as the sole authority, and then they're like, well, most of us agree. Yeah, I don't buy the consensus appeals. Yeah, okay, most philosophers of religion are theists. Are you going to convert to Christianity now? I didn't think so. So this whole thing, this with philosophers, when they have nothing to fall back on, they just say, but we all agree. And I'm just so tired of it. I'm just so tired of it. Okay, so let me check the chat again. And then I'm going to get into talking about where I really want to get with this post. So I will be setting up a link for this so that you could see the post. But I'll recap a bit of where we were and then try to get to where I wanted to get with this argument. Okay, let's see what people have to say. Answers in atheism. Oh, Lance, you're making me sad now. Why was I making you sad? I know that was about 15, 20 minutes ago, but let me know what I was saying at the time. Oh, no. So Andrea says, are you guys also noticing a delay between the audio and the video? Audio is coming first like 2 seconds for me. So I started a second stream and it's still happening if that's happening for some people. We'll see. Maybe I could fix that later. I don't know. Or maybe I'll just have a stream that it's going to be hard to watch. The Mahayana mind says, I was actually surprised listening to Lance the other day. I guess I disagree with him more than I thought. Yeah, it looks like we were on the same page on the free will stuff, but maybe not so much on the consciousness stuff. All right, I'm still moving through. The Mahayana mind says, yeah, I just disagree. I think there are only first-person perspectival stances. So I might actually agree that there are only first-person perspectival stances. I just don't think that they're characterized by qualia phenomenal states. I'm just really against the idea of qualia phenomenal states, mostly because I don't think that they're meaningful. I don't think that whether there was such a thing or not could or does make any practical, like it has no practical consequences. I'm going to take a pretty pragmatist view about this, and I think we can explain why people are mistakenly disposed to think that there are such things through a kind of genealogical debunking argument where we look at the methods of contemporary analytic philosophy and we see how philosophers came to make the sorts of philosophical and intellectual mistakes that they're making. And I think it's largely from bad methods built on top of human cognition and certain features of it. And so basically, I think people are misled by their phenomenology coupled with bad philosophical methods into making pretty big mistakes about what they think the nature of consciousness is like. All right. All right, still going through. James Apperson says, a moral anti-realist who speaks morality is a definitely existing concept. Those people just aren't trying to understand. Not entirely sure what you mean. Maybe you're referring to my view of saying that it's not, certain forms of non-naturalist realism are not meaningful. Could be. David Hume says, anti-realism seems to be so common sense. Yeah, so it's actually not my view that my views on things are the common sense view. I think that in many cases, there just isn't a common sense view with respect to certain philosophical disputes. So the analogy I give, some people like it, some people don't, is I compare it to quantum mechanics. So you ask people, you could consider when people make claims like, I think it's going to rain this weekend, is that person, which view of quantum mechanics is that person committed to? Because they're making a causal claim. So, how do they think that when quantum events occur inevitably between now and then, how do we explain that? Do we appeal to the Copenhagen interpretation? Do we appeal to many worlds, to some pilot wave view, hidden variable views? Is it one of those three? Maybe there's others, a bunch. I don't, I'm not a theoretical physicist. So which view are they implicitly committed to? Well, the answer is none. They don't need to be committed to any of those views. Which view are they explicitly committed to? Very likely none. Most people don't have views on how to interpret quantum mechanics. And you can see, it's just not the purpose of everyday causal language that it needs to take a stance on how to interpret quantum mechanics. I think the same thing with everyday normative moral claims, like evaluative, that person's a jerk, and that's a terrible thing, and you shouldn't do that. I don't think that requires any particular stance on meta-ethics. And I would say the same about consciousness. I don't think when people talk about experiences or seeing red or describing things, that it requires them to accept or reject any philosophical perspective on the nature of consciousness. I think by and large, most language just doesn't speak one way or the other about many central philosophical issues. I think the same thing about free will. And so what I favor is a broad, you could say, folk indeterminacy with respect to these philosophical disputes. I think people don't have views on them. Oh, right. Oh, wow. That's a lot of comments. So maybe I'll come back to these. Oh, wow. There's so many. Wow. I love all this interaction. Unfortunately, it's going to end up getting, a bit out of hand because I see like 50 more comments and there's just no way I could respond to all of them. I'm going to take a quick look just to see if there's anything particularly juicy. So Andre says, is there a super chat or donation thing? There is not. So I have not been, I'm not big enough, I think, to set up monetization yet. So it's not an option yet. I would really love for it to be an option. If someone wants to throw some money at me to complain about consciousness, I'll take it. That sounds great. So stay tuned for that. I'm coming up on it. I think you need to hit 4,000 hours viewed or something and 1,000 subscribers. So let's see what we're at actually. Take a little break. I'm actually feeling my throat is getting sore and tired again. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to go through the post because it's more grueling to do that. So yeah, I'm struggling again. So I might need to take a longer break. We'll see. So I'm at 847. So I got about 150 subscribers to go. And let's see. Or I could just be wrong about what you need for monetization. I really want to get there by the end of the year, though. So we got 2 months to get 150 people. If you could help me out with that, I would love it. So yeah, I think you need 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours watch time. So I'm not going to hit that by the end of the year because I'm only at 2,000 hours. So that's unfortunate. All right. So let's see. I'm going to go through it and see if people tag me in some of the comments, and then I'll make it a little easier to respond to some of them. Yeah, please do. If you have direct questions for me, just do the little @ thing. And so it makes it easier for me to see them. Okay. So the Mahayana says, no, it was on your claim that science empirics should be wedded back into rationalism philosophy. So what is it that can you maybe clarify what you disagree about? I'm curious. I am a strong empiricist. I deny rationalism in all senses, metaphysical, a priori, and even innatism. We might just agree about that. So I don't really buy into metaphysics, like most metaphysical stuff at all. I can't think of anything where people get into metaphysics and I'm like, yeah, I'm on board with that. So, I'm going to take a lot more of an instrumentalist approach. I'm much more of a shut up and crunch the numbers kind of person for things. And I'm much more in favor of saying, hey, there's more or less useful models or ways of interfacing with the world. And each one of them can be taken piecemeal. So 2 models could even conflict with one another. And if they're useful for the purposes to which you deploy them. And I don't know that there really is some underlying reality that we're capturing with our models. But if there is, I don't know that it has some sort of nature that we can access through our a priori reasoning or anything like that. At best, we can approximate or model it, and that's always going to come from a perspective, from a point of view, and it's always going to be because we're agents, and I think that we act in accordance with our goals and motivations. There's it's sort of at a fundamental level, what we're doing when we're forming these models is we're deploying them, we're using them. And I think that's a kind of inescapable feature of the way that we interface with reality. So it's a kind of Nerat's boat type situation. It's as if you already found yourself at sea and there's no foundation. You can't start from any particular starting point. You've got to replace the boards in the ship as you go. You've got to keep building building your epistemic house while you're living in it, basically, or your ship, to keep consistent with the metaphor. And I don't think we can escape that. I don't think there's a way to take a view from nowhere or an outside view, a view from outside a perspective. So, when you see stuff like John Rawls and this, like, the original position, it's like, hey, the kind of society we should build is a society where you imagine that you don't know which person you are in that society. And, it's a cool idea. And it might be a good idea to try to see what we come up with when you do your best to approximate, like, hey, I don't know anything about what kind of person I am in society. But psychologically speaking, I don't actually think we can fully escape that, because all of our judgments are like what level of risk we're willing to tolerate, our attitudes, our values. They're all so deeply, ingrained, like enculturation, and our unique histories and experiences are going to shape us so thoroughly. It's not fully escapable. You could do your best to suppress or mitigate it, but you can't really escape it. Wow, so many more comments. This is really cool. All right. So let me get into just finishing up what I want to say about this post, and then I'll get back to interacting with people if I've got more time for that. Okay, so basically what I did in the last stream is I talked about some of the setup to get us where we're at in this paper. And the paper is engaging with this Moorean argument, which goes like this. And it's an argument against illusionism. Premise 1, people sometimes feel pain. Premise 2, if illusionism is true, no one feels pain. And then the conclusion, therefore, illusionism is false. Now, this, according to Kammerer, Chalmers regards this as the best argument against illusionism. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that Chalmers thinks that it's a good argument, but this is supposed to be the best argument. It's kind of Moorean argument against illusionism. I think it's a really bad argument. And I think it's a really bad argument because I think that as it stands, the argument is ambiguous. And it's ambiguous in a way where and I think this is a common feature of, arguments with two premises. So just like a really standard syllogism like this, they are ambiguous in a way that each one of the premises taken in isolation sounds really plausible. But they're set up in a way where there's a sort of overall ambiguity in what exactly is meant by the key terms in each of the premises. And if you resolve that ambiguity and you avoid equivocation by keeping it consistent as you go through examining the truth of the two premises, you resolve it in a way where either the first premise is false or the second premise is false. And this is really sneaky because if someone presents you with a syllogism like this, they could say, hey, premise 1, premise 2, conclusion. I win. If you want to disagree, what people often say is, which premise do you reject? Now, imagine how that would work, right? So here's a person that says, hey, Lance, you're stupid. Illusionism is wrong. And in fact, they wouldn't just say, I'm stupid. They would say, you're big dumb. You're really, really dumb. Illusionism is the dumbest position in the world. You should all just be laughed out of the academic world because you're denying what's the most obvious thing in the world. So you're not just stupid. You're like a mega ultra stupid to the max. You're really stupid. Anyway, so here's my argument, which not only proves you're wrong, but also that you're stupid. So this is not an ad hominem because they're not saying I'm wrong because I'm stupid. They're saying I'm wrong and I'm stupid because of how wrong I am. Which maybe they could be right, but here's how the argument is going to work. Premise 1, people sometimes feel pain. Premise 2, if illusionism is true, no one feels pain. The conclusion, illusionism is false. So what am I going to do if I try to reject the premises? Imagine rejecting this premise. I reject the premise that people sometimes feel pain. Would you do that? Would you say, yeah, I don't agree with that. People don't sometimes feel pain. You're going to sound like the biggest idiot on the planet. You're going to sound like a moron. Of course people feel pain. So you can't reject that. Okay, so the second premise. If illusionism is true, no one feels pain. Okay, let's say I reject that. Say, are you a complete idiot? Illusionism, by definition, means that no one feels pain. Because when I'm talking about feeling pain, I'm talking about qualitative experiences. I'm talking about pain qualia. And illusionism is the view that it entails that there are no qualia. So, of course, if illusionism is true, no one has pain qualia. This is trivially true. It's just part of the definition. So you can't deny that. So you can't reject either premise. You're stuck. Illusionism is false, and you're really stupid because it took me like, what? How many words is this? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, apparently I can't count. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 15 words. I can prove illusionism is false in 15 words. So It's ridiculous that anyone is an illusionist. Now, here's the thing. If arguments like this, and I'm not saying that Chalmers thinks this or anybody else thinks this, does anyone seriously think that simple syllogisms are just going to settle philosophical issues? Because here's the thing. People will say I'm really uncharitable for saying certain concepts are unintelligible in philosophy. Think about what the alternative is. The alternative is that this is all perfectly intelligible, and let's just assume maximum charitability, right? Supposed charitability. You'll see why this is actually a problem. The terms are all super clear. None of them are meaningless. They're not ambiguous. Their meaning is clear, and the argument is good. Okay, so then why would illusionists still be illusionists? Are they just complete idiots? So if you really proved it wrong, why are there illusionists? That's not charitable. To presume everything you're saying is super clear, your argument is a really good one, but your opponents are just such big idiots they don't accept your argument anyway. How is that charitable? So when I come along and I say, hey, actually, I think that there are conceptual confusions that are downstream of certain sorts of methodological and metaphilosophical commitments that result in there being a lack of clarity and confusion that leads people to making various types of conceptual mistakes when they present these arguments. And so one consequence of that is that actually the way that they're framing their position, it's not actually meaningful. They would need further clarification, and probably they'd have to come up with a new position that avoids these problems. That is somehow seen as uncharitable, but all my opponents are really stupid idiots that don't see how they're obviously wrong. Somehow that's not uncharitable. What? I think people have it backwards. I think they really do have it backwards. But that's the other thing. It's like no one is persuaded by these arguments. So why do philosophers do this? The whole thing, so much of philosophy looks performative to me. You look at these debates between two philosophers, and what you'll see is like, the realist or whatever the position is. They'll present some argument, and the other person's heard that argument 100 times, and they give you the rote response, and the other person gives you the rote reply, and the other person gives the rote reply to that. And it looks like a choreographed dance. It looks like a fight scene in a movie where, you know how those fight scenes, they're so annoying, right? So a person is fighting another person, and then you see all the other people that are like there and they're armed, and they're all like kind of moving around, but they're not attacking. Why would anyone do that? No, they're going to hit you when your back is turned. So there's all this really terrible choreography in movies where people, sword fights where it looks like they're trying to hit their swords together, clang, 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 clang. And if you see a real sword fight, it's not like that, and someone gets stabbed in like 3 seconds. That is what philosophical debates look like. They look like theater. It looks like clang, 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 clang. Oh, we all made our moves. And then at the end of it, they just go on being alive, thinking, their view survives this stupid encounter with foam swords. And no one notices this. I notice it. Don't you notice that it looks like, if you looked at the philosophical, what's in the literature, the philosophical literature, and you seriously think, are these people trying to resolve these issues? It doesn't look like it to me. This looks like recreation. It looks like people are having fun, coming up with clever shit to say. It doesn't look like people that are seriously dedicated to actually resolving these issues. And think about it. What would actually happen if you resolve issues in consciousness and free will, morality, metaphysics? Like, what if views like mine are correct and most metaphysics is a catastrophic waste of time? Like, it's all bullshit. You shouldn't do it. But what are you going to do now? You're not going to do metaphysics, I can tell you that much. If there are no objective moral facts to find out, what are you going to do? Maybe there's not much to do. And so there is a strong incentive for people that think that those views are wrong to be the ones doing the work, because, a couple things. Anybody that's going to take a perspective like me, why are we going to continue in a field where we think it doesn't work? Like, you're not going to get too many people that recognize alchemy doesn't work, that get a degree in alchemy and keep doing alchemy. So you're going to get a lot of people like me that just leave the field or never went into the field in the first place. So, it's not like I became this way. I was always this way, where I had this very metaphilosophically different view on philosophy. And I had, ever since an undergrad, but this happened in graduate school too. Why are you here? Then why do you study philosophy? Then why don't you just quit? Maybe this isn't the discipline for you. Maybe you should go find something else. Maybe you should go be a psychologist, go do a PhD in psychology. Why are you even here? Over and over and over. There's social pressure to not do what I'm doing. I could have just quit and went and did something else. And I bet some people do. But just the general point is just that we drive people out of the field when we act like you have to share these values or these presuppositions or these dogmas. There's status quo here. There's a way we do things. And if you're not going to get on board, get the hell out of here. We don't like you being here. And I think it's just such an awful, toxic, unhealthy, stupid, closed-minded, blinkered, terrible, unphilosophical attitude. And I think it permeates contemporary analytic philosophy. There's this attitude that I've encountered over and over and over, that if you don't want to play the game we play the game, if you don't want to play the game the way we play the game, we don't want you here. We don't want to play ball with you. Now, I should say that isn't always the case for everybody. It's not like everywhere I go, people are like, get out of here, Lance. A lot of this is just crap I encounter online. I am sure, or at least I'm confident, that if people that are critical of contemporary philosophical methods or analytic philosophy go to philosophy conferences, I don't know, people like Capellan that say philosophers don't use intuitions, I'm sure they get a positive reception places and people are polite, friendly to them at conferences. But I still think that there's some degree of social pressure to exit the field if you don't want to share in the presuppositions of the sort of mainstream view. And I find that so unfortunate because it gives undue weight to whichever view happens to be ascendant or more popular. And I really, really, really don't like that. Okay, so you have this argument. Now, as I said, take either premise in isolation. Premise one, people sometimes feel pain. If you're an illusionist, you don't want to reject that. That sounds stupid. And if you're an illusionist, if illusionism is true, no one feels pain. Well, that they could argue is trivially true. What's the problem with that? Well, take people sometimes feel pain. Now, let's say, and this is something Kemmerer makes a similar point in the paper. Let's say you take a functionalist view of pain, or you take any view of pain. In fact, we don't have to get into specifics. Some view of pain that's consistent with illusionism. So some view where it's cashed out in descriptive terms, functional terms, whatever. Okay, so you accept that view of pain, right? Some view of pain that does not require, it's not a phenomenal approach to pain. So it's not phenomenal pain. So let's just call it non-phenomenal pain. Okay, so now premise one, people sometimes feel non-phenomenal pain. Now, in order to have this argument not equivocate, in order for this argument to remain, a valid argument where you're not actually changing the meaning, and you would actually have to change the symbols if you formalized it, we have to keep that in the second premise. So now we have people sometimes feel non-phenomenal pain. And then premise two, if illusionism is true, no one feels non-phenomenal pain. Bingo. You could just reject that because that does not follow from illusionism, and illusionists could just reject that. I mean, illusionists could think, yeah, people don't feel phenomenal pain, but they also don't feel non-phenomenal pain either. But they probably wouldn't. That's silly. That's stupid. So an illusionist would just say, yeah, okay, then I reject premise two, right? So if by feel pain, you mean non-phenomenal pain, premise two is false. Now let's flip it around and say, okay, you do mean phenomenal pain. Okay, so now premise one, people sometimes feel phenomenal pain. Okay. And then let's have a look at premise two. If illusionism is true, no one feels phenomenal pain. Now that's trivially true because illusionism just is the view, among other things, because it's the view that there are no phenomenal states, but people mistakenly think they are. Now, that second part, that people mistakenly think there are, that's really irrelevant to this argument. So really, if we wanted to simplify this, we don't actually have to construe this as an argument against illusionism. It's any view that denies phenomenal pain, right? And so you can actually drop that second part, and that just leaves you with the illusionism as being functionally in this argument, the view that there are no phenomenal states. So we could actually swap out illusionism for the view that there are no phenomenal states. And really, it doesn't have to be pain, because it'd be weird to say people sometimes feel happiness, to say that that's false, or people sometimes see red, to say that that's false, right? And so really, pain isn't doing any special work here. What actually matters for this argument is the notion of a phenomenal state. And so the idea of feels pain could be swapped out for phenomenal state. And so now let's see what the argument actually looks like. People sometimes have phenomenal states. If the view that people don't have phenomenal states is true, then So if illusionism is true. So if the view that there are no phenomenal states is true, then there are no phenomenal states. So the view that there are no phenomenal states is false. Now, why is the view that there? So actually, what you end up with, look at what you end up with. The first premise would be people sometimes have phenomenal states. And then the conclusion is that the view that there are no phenomenal states is false. it's completely trivial. And the second premise would just be a tautology. So you end up, if you formalize it, is you get something like P, if not P, then not P, therefore P. That's what this argument really looks like when you break it down. If you resolve, so, and the only other way to get around that is to, make the first premise false by resolving the ambiguity. So the ambiguity here centers on this notion of feeling pain. If you resolve the ambiguity in a way where it's non-phenomenal pain, then the first premise is just false and the argument isn't sound. If you resolve it in terms of being phenomenal pain, then the first premise is that people have phenomenal states. And the relevant feature of illusionism just is that there are no phenomenal states. So the argument begs the question. It just begs the question. And it begs it in a way that's like transparent and really trivial once you unpack what's really being said here. And so I think that what to me at least, so obvious to me, question begging nature of this argument is hidden behind a mask of ambiguity. And that mask of ambiguity deliberately incorporates the notion of pain to add extra rhetorical punch. So what you want to do is go around saying illusionists don't even think people feel pain. They're terrible, evil, no good people. They don't just think we don't see red. They don't even think people feel pain. What monsters? What monsters? They don't care if people suffer. They're assholes. They're awful people. So this is rhetoric masquerading as an argument. And here's the thing. This generalizes. This is how a lot of philosophers argue. It's straight up sophistry, bullshit, rhetoric, pretending to be a serious argument. And it pretends to be a serious argument. How? By characterizing itself in formalistic terms. Throw it into a syllogism, and suddenly it's not rhetoric. It's formal. It's serious. It's urbane. It's sophisticated. This is bullshit wrapping itself in formalistic clothing to conceal that fact. That this is just someone trying to sneer at the illusionist by making it seem like the illusionist is committed to something they're not, which is that people don't feel pain in any normatively relevant sense, or in like that they don't even think if you poke someone with a hot poker that there's anything that they disapprove of going on there. And it comes down to then a normative issue. There's an implication here that illusionists are just dirtbags that don't care about people's suffering. That is what's behind this argument. This is not a good argument. This is a goofy, question-begging argument hiding behind rhetoric. And so much analytic philosophy is just that. It's just that. And what I want to do outside of moral realism, because I've done it with normative entanglement, and I've shown how critiques of anti-realism rely on falsely implying anti-realism has all these horrible normative entanglements that it does not have. You see the same thing here. You see the same thing with consciousness. And you're going to see the same thing with free will. You're going to see the same thing with so many other skeptical and anti-metaphysical positions, that they are denigrated through the exploitation of ambiguity and lack of clarity to make the proponents of these views seem like stupid jerks. And that is what a lot of contemporary mainstream analytic philosophy consists of. It consists of obfuscation that isn't as obvious as the over-jargonized, confusing, convoluted gibberish that you see in continental philosophy, where it's just long sentences with proprietary terminology. No, philosophers will use terms like, look at the terms here. People sometimes feel pain. Very simple. Simple, everyday terms. Nothing suspicious going on. Premise 2, if illusionism, there's our first technical term, is true, no one feels pain. Mostly simple terms. So there's only just this one technical term, illusionism. And everything surrounding it is everyday, plain, simple language. It's short, it's 15 words. It's not anything that should get people to go, oh, this person doesn't know what they're talking about. This looks straightforward. It looks clear. This is not clear. This argument only looks like it might work by exploiting ambiguity. That's the only way it could work. So why is this in a published paper? Why would anyone take this seriously? Why would anyone take this seriously? I have no idea. I don't actually know. Why is the obvious bullshit of this argument even in a published academic journal? Why would anyone spend 5 seconds on this other than to point out this is rhetoric pretending to be a serious argument? What else is there to say? I think the answer is nothing. It's a rhetorical question. I think there's nothing else to say. This is a verbal trick. And I think Wittgenstein was right in calling attention to problems of language and philosophy. And I think a lot of philosophers don't want to face up to that fact. I don't know what else there is to say about the blog post. Go read it if you have the time. And if not, don't. But I guess, part of my concern is that philosophers play around with these syllogisms as if there's something serious and substantive going on when there really isn't. And pointing out what the problem is actually pretty straightforward. And when you point out what that problem is, it's kind of depressing, because I'm not pointing out, ooh, there's some big philosophical problem and we resolved it. I'm pointing out a kind of lame, a lame type of trick with words. It's just tricks with words. This is the verbal equivalent of a magician doing misdirection with their hands and making a ball appear, like a quarter appear behind your ear or something like that. That's all this is. It's prestidigitation with words. And honestly, again, I'm tired of wearing the kids' gloves. It's pathetic. It's pathetic that so much contemporary analytic philosophy wastes its time on nonsense like this. And I'm tired of pretending that any of this is worth engaging with as if it's a big, sophisticated, heavy-duty, big, scary philosophical issue. When a lot of this stuff, if you're just careful and attentive to language, and you understand how pragmatics works, and you understand how implications work, and you can see the rhetoric for what it is, when you pull back the curtain and you realize there's no magic going on here, there's just, it's like the Wizard of Oz. You pull back that curtain and it's just, what does this come down to? People have certain desires, goals, attitudes, dogmas, things they're committed to, and they really, really, really want them to be true. And they exploit formal logic. They exploit the ability to coin technical terms. They exploit syllogisms and formalization. And sometimes they they do a bunch of fancy symbolic logic. They use all of that to what strikes me as a desperate attempt to preserve a sense of meaning. That there's so much of this concern that all these anti-realisms and all these skepticisms would strip the world of meaning and value. That you're going to make it just a rainy, gray, dismal world if it doesn't have all the fancy metaphysics in it. It's just got to be fancy metaphysics. You got to have all that stuff out there. You got to have meaning and value and truth and all the stuff out there. Now, what do I think is going on here? Well, I think most of this is a legacy of a distinctively Western approach to philosophy that was corrupted and tainted, not just by Plato, but by the infusion and exposure to monotheistic religions, primarily Christianity. And so I think that for centuries, for a couple thousand years, Christianity held such a compelling sway over people's minds that generation after generation after generation were enculturated into and just breathed the air of a world in which value was to be located outside of you. God had a plan. God made the world with purpose and value. God is really behind everything. And when you die, if you do the right things or have the right beliefs, good things will happen to you. You'll see your loved ones again. It's beautiful. It's glorious. The whole world has justice just built into the fabric of the universe itself. You don't have to figure out your own rules. You're not a castaway marooned on this world, on this, little pale blue dot, that there's no one out there to tell you what to do. There's no rules written into the nature of the universe itself. You got to figure it out yourself. That's scary. That's scary to have to create your own value, to find your own rules, to know that there's, if you die, maybe there's nothing there, that there's no point to any of this other than the points you make out of it. So God provided all of that. And as we move through the Enlightenment, we move through the secularization of the academic world and of society at large, it chipped away at the philosophical foundations, where once it was obvious to most people that God was at the foundation of reality, that started to fall victim to doubt. And that the problem wasn't so much the metaphysics of atheism. The problem was a loss of value and meaning. This was a threat to people's sense of value and meaning being outside of them. And I think so much of this desperate attempt of the secular elements of contemporary analytic philosophy to hold on to value and meaning, it comes up in consciousness, it comes up the most in morality, but in so many other domains. I think it's a fear of nihilism. I think people fear being left in a world where value and meaning and purpose and direction isn't given to them on a platter. Now, that isn't to say it's an easy platter. It's, I wouldn't say like it's easy to live a Christian life or whatever. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's still a platter. And it's not like you got to go get your own food. At least it's there. Maybe it's not so easy to eat it all. And I think that's what's behind a lot of this. I'm not saying this explains everything, but I do think that this fear of nihilism is behind so much of the resurgence in non-naturalist realism. There's something that to me looks crypto-theistic about the appeal of these sorts of things. And that bothers me, not because I'm an atheist. I don't endorse theism. It bothers me because I think there's a failure to appreciate the parochial and blinkered perspectives on the part of philosophers themselves, that it doesn't seem to me that they recognize, at least I think this is going on, that they recognize that for what it is. Maybe some of them do and they won't admit it, but I think most people are they're not seeing what's going on here. That people are picking their conclusions first, and then they're using philosophy to try to vindicate them, those initial thoughts, in a way that I think isn't epistemically virtuous and is fundamentally at odds with the spirit of philosophy. I think and I think this is especially true of rationalistic philosophers, they want to preserve the house that they see around them. And philosophical perspectives that would cause us to fundamentally reorient our perspective on the nature of reality, those are wrong. Those are, I think for them, it's easy to dismiss those as like obviously wrong. But I think maybe, and I'm being harsh here, I'm psychologizing a bit, and I could be wrong. Of course I could be wrong about all of this. I think there's a bit of fear under that. And, again, I think it's motivated by a fear of nihilism. And, science has shown us over and over and over, when it comes to the natural world, we're just wrong, over and over and over. Our intuitions are not well calibrated, and we're just wrong about it. And if that turns out to be the case with respect to the sort of remaining cluster of philosophical issues, that's a scary world. That's a weird world, and it's not a world I think a lot of people are comfortable wanting to move to. I think people really fear what they take to be revisionary accounts, philosophical accounts that would cause them to radically alter the way that they see the world. But for me, and maybe I have a bias in favor of these views, I see that as exciting, as invigorating, as adventurous. It's cool that we turn out, I think, to be radically wrong about consciousness, radically wrong about free will, at least the sort of mainstream philosophical views. For me, though, that's actually somewhat diminished by the fact that I don't know how much I was ever caught up by those other views anyway. For me, I think these views are interesting and exciting and cool, sort of independently for their own sake. And then I also think it's cool that those views are so radically at odds with the views of the people around me. But yeah, I used to be a Christian. And so there's probably some changes that have occurred. But, those changes occurred so long ago, and they dissolve so quickly. I don't even have a good sense of what it was like to be a Christian anymore. And I think that my philosophical views at the time were so underdeveloped that I think it would be overstating it to think that I had this fundamentally different worldview that was like really robust and fleshed out, and then I transitioned into a very different worldview that was more fleshed out. It's more like I had a very vague, fuzzy, foggy view of the world, and then as it clarified, it increasingly moved away from a Christian worldview. So I wish I could appeal to my own experience as a knowledge of having once held these views, but I don't really think that I had much in the way of them. Anyway, so I've said a lot there. Let's actually get back into the chat. And so that's going to wrap up the blog post. I don't want to go through reading it all. I don't think I could, and it's pretty long. And I don't think that would be as good as just, talking. Cool. So there's a lot of comments. Let me see if I got tagged in any of them. 639. Okay. I'm going to scroll back a little bit. Okay. I don't want to leave too much dead air. So if you want direct comments to me, or you want me to comment on something, please tag me in it so that I could see it. So I'm going to start focusing primarily on those. So let me pull up one of these. And also, thanks so much for everybody being really active in the chat. It really makes me feel like I'm not alone here, just monologuing in the dark. Although I guess I sort of am in some ways. All right. Okay, here is the one I was looking for. Jonathan Becker says, I'd be curious if you know of any histories of the development of realism. This seems like an interesting theory of its origins and not super implausible. I don't. That is a project for another day. Maybe a project if I ever have like a graduate student or something to get into the history. It would be great to talk to someone that's more of a historian of ethics that is just super knowledgeable. I should say that my view is very similar in certain ways to Nietzsche. So this is not like I originated with this view. There's also a really cool paper by Mashery called, this is Edouard Mashery at the University of Pittsburgh. What's the name of it? Morality, a Historical Invention. And that is in the Atlas of Moral Psychology. I think the editor is Kurt Gray. I think it came out in 2018. And that is super duper cool. If someone wants, I don't want to spend all my time looking up links. So if someone can look that up, check it out on Amazon or something, the Atlas of Moral Psychology, editor Kurt Gray, post that in the chat, please. And if you check it out on Amazon, I'm sure you could go through the table of contents and find it. There's another great, that actually, the whole thing is good. Maybe not every single chapter is good, but there's other good stuff in there too. There's another one in there by Stephen Stitch called The Moral Domain, I think. And that just argues that there is no moral domain. And that's also a view that I hold. So actually, insofar as I'm a moral anti-realist, I don't think that morality exists in a certain sense. I don't think moral judgments form a natural kind. So there are more senses in which I don't think morality exists. I do think it exists, though, in a certain respect. I think it's cultural. I think it's a cultural invention. So, it would be weird. I'm not an anti-realist about morality any more than I'm an anti-realist about baseball. Like, it's not like I think baseball doesn't exist. That'd be ridiculous. I'm not a baseball anti-realist. But I don't think that there are objective facts about whether or not you ought to play baseball. That would be ridiculous. And so I see morality as a sort of culturally constructed pseudo-domain that manifests in some cultures and not others. And it's a little less specific than baseball, actually, I think. But that's a discussion for another day. There is another cool paper, while I'm mentioning cool papers that are really influential. I think the paper is called The Disunity of Morality and Why It Matters to Philosophy. And that's by Talia Wheatley and Walter Sennett Armstrong. And that's another great paper. In fact, they have two papers on that topic, and they're both good. So check those out. So, yeah, do I know about the histories, as Jonathan Becker asks? No, not really. Oh, right. Let's look for more remarks directed at me. Yeah, several other people have said that I'm out of sync. Sorry about that. I don't know what the problem is. I thought that it was switching to 1080p, but it doesn't look like it. So, because I think I switched it back to 720, right? So, yeah, I did. So, does this actually change in real time if I switch it to 1080? Does it switch? Did I just increase the resolution? I don't know how it works. I don't know. I'm on StreamYard right now. So, yeah, I should be out of sync. I don't know if that'll be fixed later or if it's possible to fix it. If not, I'm sorry about that. I don't know what the problem is. All right. Facundo Cisa says independent like this. Yes. Yeah. So use the @ thingy. All right. And I'm still getting caught up. So one person said that they wanted to say that and it looks like it got cut off. Pixel Dan. I don't know what happened, but your remark got cut off. So you wanted to say my argument was something. All right. Facundo says, I appreciate your very appropriate anger at this low and disgusting and obvious dirty tricks. They're shameful and we need to get scientists on our side. I agree. Of course, I'm disagreeing with myself. So what does that amount to? Patrick says baseball realism confirmed. You know what I should do? I want to get someone to talk about to get somebody on here that knows about the Julian Jaynes stuff, the origin of consciousness and the breakdown of the bicameral mind. I don't buy into the view, but it's just such a cool idea that I want people talking about it. I don't even care. I just love it so much. It's such a cool idea. yeah, it's cool. I'm not going to get into that now too, but I should try to see if someone would be willing to pop on. That's like, I think there's like a Jane Society to talk about it. It's just fascinating. So I would love to do that at some point too. It just occurred to me, like I'm talking about consciousness. Why not get somebody to talk about that idea? I think so. Here's the thing I would say about that. Even if that view is wrong, I think it raises such cool and interesting questions about history and how we analyze what people have said in the past. And we raise questions about the sort of how much culture has shaped the nature of consciousness or the particular way in which consciousness manifests in contemporary society. I think there's really cool questions to raise there. And, you know, I don't know. I just think it's a cool idea. Maybe there are some people that think that the idea is just so far-fetched that it's just too ridiculous to consider. But I hold views that people see that way. So too bad. So I'm not sympathetic to people dismissing views on the grounds that they are ridiculous if those people don't have good reasons why. So if someone wants to say that historical analysis is not a very good analysis, that sort of thing, I'd be receptive to that. But people just looking at it a view and saying it's obviously ridiculous because of my intuitions, I don't buy into that at all. That's never going to be persuasive to me. If you want to show that something is wrong, show why it's wrong. Don't just go, it's obvious. I just philosophers. I mean, when did philosophy get to this point where people just go around going, it's self-evident? It's like, maybe it was always that way. Maybe if I really knew what philosophy was like, I always would have hated it. I don't know. Yeah. So Supercritical Snake says, does YouTube have a setting to delay the stream and sync the audio and video? It seems like the 1080 encoding might be causing the problems. That's what I suspect, because this problem happened right when I added it. So I don't know. So I don't know how to deal with that, and I can't deal with it right now. So I'm going to have to investigate and figure it out. If anyone has thoughts in the chat, do let me know, because this would be a cool thing to troubleshoot in real time. Oh, cool. Okay, Pixel Den here says, I just want to say that I find your arguments so clear and useful that they're clearing my mind in totally different topics. Awesome. Success. Yes. Thanks so much. That is, you know, I do sometimes get people saying pretty critical things, and I think I tend to focus on those a lot. So I really need to practice reading positive comments and absorbing them and grokking them and internalizing them and going, yeah, okay, sometimes I can reach people and make a positive difference, I hope, at least according to those people. All right. Pinecone says, hi, Dad. I don't understand what that's about. Yeah. Answers in Atheism in reference presumably to the Jane's book. I have that book, Lance. I'm afraid of it. Is it on Audible? Because if it's on Audible, that's because I have the book. Is it over there? I think it's over there. I'm not going to start digging up the stack of books. You can't see, so why am I pointing off camera? I think it's in my stack of books. Now I need to know. 1 second. No, it's not there. I think it's on the actual bookshelf, but I do have a physical copy of the book. But let me check if it's on Audible. It is. Yes. Okay. I'm going to get it. I'm going to have to get it on Audible. So yeah, cool. Justin Moore says, I want a clang, clang, clang t-shirt with stick figure philosophers dueling. Yeah. You know, I'm of mixed feelings about this, that, you know, I really want to have some merchandise. I should show you at some point. I do have, my wife got for me one Lance Independent shirt with a logo. I'm super happy with my logo. You can see it on, the other side. Okay. I messed up. There's a logo. So I really like the logo that someone made for me. And so I'm very happy with that. I was thinking about putting that on a shirt, but who wants to wear weird merchandise that no one recognizes it? So I really got to come up with like cool images and funny ideas and stuff like that to put on a shirt. In fact, so I use Canva for making my thumbnails, and I did come up with some t-shirt ideas. So also, yeah, some of them are kind of silly. So one of them is a reference to an old video, and it says no justification, no pudding. So That has to do with some of my views on meta ethics, how people will say, what's your justification for having your moral values? And to me, that sounds really ridiculous. It's like someone saying, what's your justification for preferring chocolate ice cream over vanilla ice cream? And if you don't have the idea is, if you're an anti-realist, you don't have a justification for your philosophical views. So how can you go around saying, like, objecting to murder or imposing your standards on others if you don't have a justification? What's the basis, the foundation of your views? And it's like, look, I prefer that people don't murder, and that's enough for me. Now, just transpose that over to food. And you sit down and you're going to eat your chocolate ice cream and someone stops you. Hey, you stop right there. What's your justification for preferring that over this pistachio ice cream? Why are you justifying eating that instead of this pistachio ice cream? That's a bizarre question because, it's like, well, because I want to eat this. But you just preferring things isn't a justification. You need a philosophical defense. And that would be absurd. You can act on your preferences. Someone can try to stop you, I guess, but the whole idea that you would need a justification, I just reject that. And so when someone says, so you don't even have a justification. Okay, well, then you don't have a justification for eating pudding. Are you concerned? Are you going to stop eating pudding because of that? So that's the idea. No justification, no pudding. And then, of course, it's also reference to Pink Floyd, the start of the Bricks in the Wall song. And it's like, how can you eat your pudding if you don't eat your meat? That whole thing. So yeah, another one of the t-shirts is it's showing a person eating a brain, and it says, if you deny gastronomic realism, then it doesn't matter what you eat. And that's making fun of the idea that, if moral realism is false, it doesn't matter what you do, nothing matters. So if gastronomic realism isn't true, which it isn't, gastronomic realism is ridiculous. Of course it's not true. It doesn't matter what you eat. You should just be indifferent to what you eat. Now, again, that's ridiculous. Again, there are no facts about what you should eat objectively, what you should eat independent of your dietary preferences or whatever. So does that mean it just doesn't matter what you eat? Well, what does that mean? Technically, objectively, it doesn't matter what you eat because gastronomic realism is false, right? Or at least, or it's maybe unintelligible. It doesn't matter what you eat. So think about that. It doesn't matter objectively what you eat. So is that going to impact how you make decisions about what to eat? No, come on now. It doesn't. It's irrelevant. And this is part of my problem with non-naturalist conceptions of moral realism. Okay, so if moral realism is false, nothing matters. Yeah, nothing matters objectively. Nothing matters in the sense that, like in the realist sense. Nothing realist matters. I don't care. I don't care if nothing matters in a realist sense. That never mattered to me to begin with. Things matter to me in just the same way that food tastes certain ways to me. And if you rule out nutritional concerns and monetary concerns and ethical concerns, and you're just looking at I'm trying to decide what to eat for gastronomic reasons, like what I want to enjoy. What it comes down to is my preferences. And morality is the same way. And people I really need a name for this and a paper about this. You have this problem where people will say, wait, so you're saying that morality is just like taste? So people do a couple dumb things here. Dumb thing number one. Okay, yeah, see, the gloves are totally off. Now I'm just calling people random. It's unnamed people. I'm not naming anybody. Here's dumb thing number one. Dumb thing number one is when people will think that what you're saying when you say morality is like taste preferences is that you're saying that, well, taste preferences, usually when I have taste preferences, I'm only talking about my own preferences. I'm talking about what I want to eat, what I like. And I don't really particularly care what other people want to eat. So if I go to the ice cream store and other people are in line and they're getting pistachio and chocolate and all that stuff, and I want to get some other flavor like strawberry. I like strawberry. Actually, peanut butter, like a Reese's flavor is like my favorite. So let's say I want to get Reese's ice cream. And someone else in front of me wants to get chocolate, I don't know, or Oreo ice cream. I don't like Oreo ice cream as much. I'm not going to go, hey, stop that person. You can't. I don't like when people get Oreo. No one should have Oreo. You should prefer Reese's ice cream. That's absurd because I don't care what that person eats. Now, if they ate a sufficiently nasty ice cream, maybe it would actually physically bother me to see them eat it. Some of us have attitudes about this, about music, right? Like if people really like music that you just despise, you might be like, oh, I wish they didn't like it. But I don't know that anybody's going around telling people we have to ban Taylor Swift or whatever. I mean, it would get really silly because most of us just don't care that much about other people's music preferences or taste preferences or, with respect to food. So when I say that morality is like taste, like food taste, I'm not saying it's like it with respect to its scope or its applicability. because when it comes to taste preferences, my taste preferences, for the most part, apply to me. They don't really apply to other people. But that's not the respect in which I'm comparing it to morality. I'm not saying morality is about my personal conduct and I don't care about how other people act. It is a part of my moral views that I care about how other people act. That's like a big part of it. Like, I don't want other people to steal and lie and kill. Yet sometimes some people think that if you endorse moral subjectivism, you're treating morality not just metanormatively in terms of like what makes your moral standards true is that they express your preferences in the same way that what makes it the case that peanut butter ice cream is the best to me is I like it the most, right? So when I say Reese's ice cream is the best flavor of ice cream, I'm saying something like it's my favorite. And it is my favorite, so that's true. And then if I say murder is bad, people will mistake the comparison to mean something like that you're saying I am against me murdering. And so then I go around and I don't murder. But then if someone else is murdering, the expectation, if I'm a subjectivist, is I have to go, okay, well, they like murdering, so it's okay for them to murder. In the same way that if someone else likes pistachio ice cream more than Reese's ice cream, they get to eat pistachio ice cream. I have to just be okay with other people murdering. This is stupid. That is not because that's not the point of similarity. The point of similarity is that in the case of ice cream, my preference for Reese's makes it true that I prefer Reese's the most. In the case of murder, it's not about me. It's that I prefer that nobody murder. Right. And so what makes them true is that they express my preferences, but one of them refers to my own conduct and the other refers to everybody's conduct. And so they're different in that respect. That was never the point of the comparison. The point of the comparison isn't who it applies to. It's what makes it true. The sense in which, in other words, they share the same metanormative characteristics. The same sorts of things make the normative content of the two positions true, which is preferences in this case. But the normative content of those preferences differs. One applies to my own conduct, one applies to everybody's conduct. And this gets us to the second problem with how stupid these objections are. So that's the first objection. That's the first confusion. And people are really persistent about it. And it's really, 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 really stupid. And now I think I've explained it pretty clearly. Go point it out to people when they talk about, oh, so you're saying, how can you object if you're an anti-realist? This is stupid. And this is the thing. It's not like you get a lot of these sophisticated objections to anti-realism. You get just people not understanding it. It seems like 95% of the objections are just people not understanding it. It's ridiculous. So here's the second one. People, and this generalizes. So never mind meta-ethics, right? We talked about consciousness. Now we're talking about meta-ethics. We're talking about meta-philosophical stuff. Here's another problem. People will think if you're comparing two things that, the intention is, hey, these two things share the same metanormative characteristics. People will say, you can't compare those two things. And they say, well, why? And they're like, well, because they're different. Yeah, you can only compare things that are different. You can only compare two things that are different. It's the same thing. What are you comparing? It doesn't make sense. But the problem is that when you compare two things along one dimension, this does not entail or imply that you're comparing them along any other dimensions. So if I say, my stove is hot and the sun is hot, I am not saying that they are equally as hot. So I'm comparing them in terms of some sort of categorical property. They are both hot. They're above some threshold of what I would consider to be like warm or cool or neutral or whatever. They both pass the threshold for being hot. It doesn't mean they pass the threshold to exactly the same extent. And so if you say, yeah, the stove and the sun are both hot, you might get a reaction from a lot of people that are just bad at thinking, which is to say, you can't compare those. The sun is way hotter. Oh, so that means you can't compare them. Why? And I think what they mean by that, they're not meaning like you literally can't compare them. They're saying there's something bad about your comparison. It's a bad comparison. And it's a bad comparison because they seem to think that you're saying they're equally hot. And all you're saying is they're both above some level of hot. Like imagine if I said, when I turn on my stove and I leave it on for a while, both my stove and the sun are more than 40 degrees Celsius. Okay. Now that's true. What's the objection to that? Now, if I say above 40 degrees Celsius is hot, just as an example, okay, that they're both hot. Done. Like what I'm not saying. And then at that point, if you say, look, I'm just saying they're both above 40, it'd be weird for someone to say, you're saying they're the same temperature? No, they're both above 40. Here are the two different temperatures. And they're very different from one another. So, that people are just really bad at thinking about comparisons in philosophy. Anyway, initially I was addressing this question about, a comment about t-shirts. So I thought about doing merchandise. I do feel like it could be a little cringy to make merchandise. So I don't know. What do you think? people in the chat. I'd like to hear from you about whether, I don't know, weird t-shirts about gastronomic realism would be appealing to you. I'm looking at some of these. Some of them really lack context. One of them that's relevant to the recent stuff is I have science can never explain hydrophysical harmony. So the correlation between water and wetness. So it's poking fun at psychophysical harmony. Oh, and then I have one where it's just a person that it looks like they're eating like a bowl of cereal or something. And it's kind of just poking fun at like a Capturing Christianity thing. And it says, by the way, gastronomic realism is true. And it's just a goofy guy smiling and eating food. Oh, one of them has a stupid slogan I came up with. Maybe I didn't come up with that. I'm going to need to find out if someone else said this first. And then I could a little quote them, which is words don't mean things, people mean things. Okay, that's it. And then the rest are a bunch of colors, of different colors I was messing around with. So yeah, I thought about t-shirts, mugs, hoodies, hats, that sort of stuff. But I don't know. I don't have a big I only have 800 something people. I don't think people buy merchandise. Like, does Joe Schmidt have merchandise? Is there Majesty of Reason merchandise? I'll buy it. If there is, I'll buy it. I don't know if Joe is here telling me I'm suppressing truth or whatever, but if you got merch, I'll buy. All right, let's go through. See if anybody else made comments. Someone just tagged me and then said, oops. Goblin Lord X. Oh, yeah. So Goblin Lord, I do. By the way, this is going to bother me unless I mention it. So I used to play Magic the Gathering. And for some reason, and this was way back in the 90s, I started playing right when Mirage came out. So I don't know if anyone remembers that. I think it's 1996. So I used to play it, and for whatever reason, I got really, really into collecting goblins. So I would just get all the goblins, and I used to have just a shoebox that was just all goblins. So I'm all about goblins. Goblins are cool. Yeah, this is random, but so I saw your comment, and it was big and heavy, and I just haven't had time to come back and get to it. You're welcome to tag me and remind me. It really doesn't bother me if you reminded me. Like, don't do it like every 5 minutes, but if you say, hey, you never responded to this, can you respond to it? That's totally fine. So I'll try to get to that comment. It was a big, weighty comment. Also, if you're comfortable with it, I'd be happy to just bring you on the stream sometime to talk about free will. If you don't want to, that's totally fine. I understand a lot of people listen or whatever, and they don't want to talk. But if you want to, that might be easier. Anyway, so let's get to your comment. I would still like to poke your brain about free will stuff. I think you referred to the problem as something which is entirely different from what I think the problem is. Cool. Okay, yeah. So that would be great. So it didn't get specific there, but yeah, maybe sometime we could do that. All right. Andre says, I've been following your work for less than a week, I believe, and it just seems to me that you're one of the people I'd pick to go to a meeting to solve important world issues. Cool. Yeah, maybe I could solve important world issues. That would be, maybe I'd have something useful to say there. Maybe that's not very modest, but I would give my input on it, see how things happen. I don't pay a whole lot of attention to current events and world events. I guess maybe my wife would dispute it because I'm always telling her, like, look what's going on in the world. And I do a lot less of that than I used to. I probably missed some comments given where I'm at. I'm about 20 minutes behind. So let me move forward. All right. J Mike says, and hey, J Mike, what's up? Lance just beats around the Lance bush. Oh my, what? Why did I opted to read this before, like I opted to put this up here before reading it. You just don't understand all the fancy $20 continental Hegelian understanding with "duh" added. Okay. All right. Pixel independent. A delay can usually be set in the recording application. At least I know most studio have the feature. Okay, so like I could use, it's called OBS, right? I have that, but I haven't really used it before. So if I could use that to fix it, then maybe I could fix it. Yeah. So, but I have no idea how. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll look at some YouTube tutorials and figure out how to resynchronize. And I'll have to edit the video and then re-upload it. Oh well, yeah. It'll be a good opportunity for learning how to do more video editing. Okay. Mahana says, I agree. It looks like maybe that was around the pudding remarks. Yeah. Mahana says, views which are positive without justification be done away with the same. All right. Still getting caught up. I am dedicated to getting caught up. I don't know what this is about. If people sometimes pray, then prayer anti-realism is false. Yeah, because like you would think prayer anti-realism would be like, hey, I deny that prayer, like intercessory prayer, works, like it's efficacious. It actually causes, gods to intervene or whatever. And so someone could say, so you think people don't pray, which would be a really dumb interpretation. Patrick says another one that's mostly false is the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Would be amazing to hear that debated by you and someone who agreed with it. Particular language influences views. Yeah, so there's a view that cuts a sort of middle ground from Christensen and Chater in the language game, where they talk about this, where, if the idea is that in culture, like culture leads to language and language leads to your way of viewing the world, and it fundamentally inhibits or prevents you from thinking certain ways. It's sort of like you could think in this way instead of that way because of language. That doesn't seem right. But if someone says, hey, language can facilitate or make easy this thought relative to that thought, and a different language, it's reversed, that certain concepts or ideas could be more salient. That strikes me as fairly plausible, that language can sort of grease the wheels for certain thoughts, and other languages may not do as good of a job of greasing the wheels for those thoughts, but I don't think that they would be fundamentally inaccessible, like to someone of a different language. I think typically, if you give people enough time, two people from different languages, and one of them doesn't really have a particular concept, that they often will be able to acquire that concept. There may be some exceptions to this that are, there might be concepts that are so sui generis and so distinctive to a particular culture, it might be hard to really grok the concept without more or less becoming a member of the culture. But I don't know how much psychology can be sort of how much doors could be closed by language. So I don't know. I'm open to the possibility that language can have more of an influence on the way we think than some people, but probably a lot less than what I've seen from others who might think that, like, if you don't have a word for this, then you can't even think about it. That strikes me as really silly and not plausible at all. Especially because I have a view of language that it's so much of like the sort of stuff that's very far from ostensive terms and like onomatopoeia and stuff like that. A lot of that stuff, I think you could build your way up to it with a lot of different languages if you just take the right approach and again, enough time. So yeah, I that would be interesting. That'd be cool to talk about that sometime. Probably something I would need to do a bit more research into. Mohams, I just saw this, so I'm posting it. I agree with the person that likes Reese's. That's, by the way, it's not just a random example. I'm really into peanut butter. I don't know why. I just like it. I've tried all the other butters. Cashew butter is good. I maybe haven't tried all of them, but almond butter is not as good. I don't know. Moxie C says, philosophers have really done moral relativism dirty. They really, really have. It's something I'm going to get to at some point, and I want to write a paper about this, is taking quotes from actual professional philosophers, and maybe some lay people too, like people that don't work in academic philosophy, and some of the ways they framed and characterized philosophy, like moral relativism, moral subjectivism, anti-realism. Because I've seen realists say stuff like, if you're a moral relativist, then you have to go up to people that are like getting murdered, and like, a person's got a gun to someone's head, and you have to say there's nothing wrong with this person that's about to torture you and kill you. There's nothing wrong with it because, there's no moral facts. And, just imagine that, like, you're an anti-realist. Yeah, there's nothing objectively wrong with anything if you're an anti-realist. But the idea is that you're some kind of scumbag that doesn't care about people suffering. It just doesn't follow from being an anti-realist. And yet professional philosophers will frame anti-realism as though that's an entailment of it. That, like, as if the anti-realist has to be like, oh no, it's not objectively wrong, so I guess I don't give a shit. I mean, it's just it's ridiculous and it's embarrassing that professional philosophers will say stuff like this. Again, I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm saying they're wrong, and they're so wrong that it's not acceptable for them to be as wrong as they are about it. They're wrong in a way that is like intellectually negligent, and it's embarrassing. And of course, some of them might say, no, these normative implications really do follow. Yeah, only if you halfway presume or beg the question in favor of your views from the outset. Like if you think, well, my view is that all the normative things follow only if realism is true. Well, I don't accept that either if I'm an anti-realist. So conditional on my view, that's not true. So you don't get to assume half your view is true when characterizing my view as if you're making an internal criticism. If you want to make an external criticism, go ahead. If you want to say, if nothing was objectively good or bad, then I wouldn't care about anything. Be my guest. It's a question you could always ask realists. Let's say you became convinced realism wasn't true. Would you stop caring about your friends and family? Would you just be indifferent to murder? Would you just let people steal your wallet? What would you do? I think the answer is nothing. Basically, nothing would change. And I think, again, it highlights just how completely superfluous and just so empty realism is. It's not just that the view half the time, depending on which realist view you're dealing with, doesn't make sense or it's just trivial. It's just so vacuous. Who cares? Why does anyone care? Anyway, I've made that point a million times. I don't want to dwell on it too much. Seeing if any more comments directed at me. Justin Moore says, I recently started digging into Nietzsche and was quite inspired by it. Also a huge wake-up call as to how little progress has been made in philosophy and the common discourse. Totally agree. Yeah, Nietzsche, is I was about to say underrated. I think Nietzsche is highly rated by some people and negatively seen by others, polarizing figures. So maybe that's just not true. But yeah, Nietzsche is just also wildly entertaining to read, for me at least. I think Thus Spoke Zarathustra is a lot of fun. Nietzsche has this awesome paper. Let me see if I can find it. It's not quite as popular as some of the other stuff. Here it is. On truth and lies in a non-moral sense. It's like 8 pages. It is just absolutely blistering and awesome. I love it. It's so cool. So yeah, Nietzsche is really cool. And yeah, so here's a strange thing. When I started, maybe it's not strange, whatever. When I started college, one of my first classes it wasn't even a philosophy class, but the instructor wanted to give everybody an assignment based on like their major. And so I don't even think I had a declared major. And they were like, well, what are you thinking about majoring? And I said philosophy. And they said, who's your favorite philosopher? I remember I said David Hume. I don't even know how much I read from Hume at that point. Because I was like, I don't know, 16 or 17. What Hume did I read at that point? And they said, have you heard of Nietzsche? I don't remember what I said. And so let's just say, I thought, oh, no. And so they said, you're going to write a paper about Nietzsche. And I dug into, let me get the book. I think it's called Philosopher, Psychologist, Antichrist by Walter Kaufmann. Yep, Nietzsche, Philosopher, Psychologist, Antichrist. So I picked that up, and it was just really eye-opening. It was really cool. So my first paper ever was on Nietzsche's idea of the Übermensch. So first philosophy paper I ever wrote. So yeah, that was weird. That was my introduction to philosophy. A very strange introduction. All right, still looking for more questions. By the way, speaking of me talking about how I want to add more content and like expand the range of content, I did do, and it will be up hopefully soon, a discussion on peer review. So like the peer review process, and in particular, taking a critical perspective towards the peer review process. So you'll see that pretty soon. So there we go. It's not going to be meta ethics all the time. Meta ethics, I don't think was referenced. Maybe I referenced it like, oh, I do work on this, but there was no discussion of it. So yeah, there you go. All right. So Patrick says, Lance, you could do t-shirts on a per order basis. What's there to lose? We can have a design contest. So what do you mean by design contest? Does that mean like people, like subscribers come up with designs? I don't know how things work. I also don't want to, I don't want to like produce stuff and then make money on it if someone else came up with the idea. Like, how do I give appropriate credit? I want to make sure I give appropriate credit. I especially don't want people like suing me like, that was my idea, Lance stole it. And it's like, well, but you gave it to me. So what? So I don't know how that works. So I'm happy. So if I could outsource this and have everybody come up with ideas and then we pick the best ones and make it a whole community thing and we make the shirts together and like whatever other merchandise, that would be cool. I'm down for that. So J Mike says, make one that says stop beating around the Lance bush. That sounds weird. I don't know. Do people like that? I guess we could, if we do a contest, we'll vote on it. I don't think it's going to win, but maybe people don't like my own ideas. Who knows? Of course, I like my ideas better. All right. Patrick says, mug idea, psychology of number one in the style of number one dad. Yeah, maybe that's another one of my like lines. Like I have all these like lines and talking points I've developed over the past year where I say philosophy is often psychology with a sample size of one. I just, no one's going to know what that means. All right. I'm still 15 minutes behind. Okay, Goblin Lord. So this was in reference to me saying, hey, come on and talk about free will. Goblin Lord says, I'd love to actually. Great. So just get in touch. We'll figure it out. So I have a Discord. If people haven't joined my Discord, you're welcome to do that. And so you could contact me there. You could also find my email. So just get in touch and we'll find a time. So Mahanis, as long as it's an interesting topic, I'd be down. Are you inviting yourself onto the channel? If you have something to talk about, we could talk about it. I don't want to just invite random people on, though, if I don't know what we're going to be talking about. Because I don't want people to just show up and be like, here's my hypothesis about why. And then they just come up with something like why crystals are in control of the earth. Like, I don't want to. I'm not saying you're going to say that. That was just a random example. But yeah, just let me know what topics you want to talk about. And then like, got to make sure that it's something that I want to talk about. It sounds like we probably just agree on most stuff. So weren't you recommending, and I don't, did you post a comment on it with all the references on, I think it was like Eastern philosophy stuff. So if you want to talk about that, that would be really cool. Okay. Yeah. Some of the stuff that you list there, I don't really do normative ethics. So I probably wouldn't want to talk about that. So you mentioned like abortion and stuff. So that's not for me. That's got to be on some other channel with someone else. I don't get into that stuff. Yeah, Patrick is making some more comments. I'm thinking Sapir-Whorf in a specific case, like why this country took to this religion, political system, something where it's just fun to chat about. How does that relate to Sapir-Whorf? Maybe I'm not understanding some of the context. If you want to say a bit more about that, that'd be helpful. I know you're talking to each other and not directing that at me. Okay, cool. So there's more. Patrick says, Lance, a popular Sapir-Whorf view is that analytic continental divide is caused by English versus French German. It makes no sense, but it's fun. That sounds weird and implausible to me. Yeah, my initial reaction is that's absurd. I would be open to the argument for it. I would consider it. What does the argument for that look like? Mahana says, I tend to think of it as a genealogical descent of the European rational versus British empiricism debate. I don't know enough about the history to really know. Yeah, I mean, is it any surprise I'm from the US? I grew up in the US, and like I have like empiricist and like pragmatist leanings, like pragmatism, and I'm American. Like, what a shock! So I'm the product of my culture, which undermines everything about me. No, you don't want to have the genetic fallacy there. Yeah, so Patrick makes a good point. Like, thing is, during that divide, the philosophers were all chatting with each other. Like, didn't Rousseau get homeless and hang out with Hume? Get homeless? Did that happen? I don't know about all this philosopher drama from back in the day. Oh, this is a fun one. Facunda says, if anti-realism is right, then nothing is right. Boom, contradiction. Yeah, philosophers really love their self-defeat arguments, and they're usually terrible arguments. Patrick says, Lance, not much is written on it, but in physics, there's what we might call error realism, like when the errors on the edge of a star overlap with the Big Bang. Is the error true or not? What? You mean like the error bars, like the star is like let's say the universe is 13.7 billion, and then like a star is 13 billion plus or minus a billion, so it might be older than the universe. Is that what you're talking about? Okay, so this is regarding design contest. Maybe ideas, maybe designs. Yeah, could have them all give all rights, or maybe donate to charity in their name. Yeah, I would. So see, it's a big step for me because I have to figure out like the legal stuff. I'm going to get really anxious about all that. I don't want to do anything I'm not allowed to do. Like take people's ideas with like, how can people waive rights? Do they need to send contracts to like 100 people? Because it's like as if 100 people are going to participate. I get like 4 people. I'm lucky. I don't know how that works. So maybe I just talk to some person that has a big YouTube channel. I don't know. I often feel like when I ask people these questions, they're like, just Google it. And then I don't trust anything on Google. So I don't know. So yeah. So if I did that, I'd want to give people prizes. And I don't have anything cool like Joe from Majesty of Reason does, like a book. I could be like, I'll give a free book that's signed to everybody. I don't have a book. So I don't know what to do. What do I do? Just buy books and give those to you from someone else? Like I give you like Schiller books or something? That seems lame. Mayana says, I'm strongly critical of Moorean arguments. Me too. It's just foot stomping. It's not an argument. Or if it's an argument, it's a bad one. I don't care if someone goes, well, it seems obvious to me. Well, good for you. I don't care. Yeah. So, Mayanis, there's not much we disagree on. Although, maybe if I end up bringing like a big group of people on, like, I don't know, 4 people, like I could sit back and let you talk with some of them and you could like represent similar views. So I'd be down with that. I'll have to do that sometime in a stream, like get 3 or 4 people in here. Patrick says the argument for it. I think this is the argument for like the Sapir-Whorf somehow influencing the nature of the continental analytic divide looks terrible. Sure, but I don't know what it is. So I'm not going to just presume that it's terrible because it seems obviously silly. So that's all I'm saying. I believe you that it's probably really, really bad. I mean, it doesn't strike me as very plausible. All right. So yeah, I think that has me caught up. And wow, I almost got to 2 hours. So if anyone has any more questions, we could do those. Otherwise, I'm gonna call it a night. So cool. That took a while. I have had some people say you spend too much time talking to your audience. To hell with that. I'm going to talk to people in the audience and talk to y'all. You know, either I won't be successful and grow the channel, in which case this is manageable. I could talk to you, or I will, in which case there might come a point where it's just that flash of text going by and I won't be able to talk to anybody anymore because it'll be too busy. Like it'll just be too chaotic. And so, you know, either I can do this or I can't, and I might as well enjoy it while I can. So I'm going to do it for now, you know? Okay, I don't see anything else coming in, so I will bid you all good night. I guess I'll go make dinner. So thanks so much, everybody, for being here. And yeah, all right, everybody. Take care. And yeah, all the normal things, please like the video, subscribe, share it with people, leave comments. As many of you have seen, I do try to interact with people in the comments section when I can. So if you have stuff to comment on, I'll try to interact, especially if you ask a question. And yeah, do all the things. Hopefully we could hit 1,000 by the end of the year. We'll get there. All right, everybody, take care. Try to do the outro. See what just happened there? It's all kinds of goofy. So it looks like it might be a StreamYard issue because I hit the outro video. It didn't do anything. There was a delay. And then and then it's like stopped too soon. So I don't know what's going on. Oh, probably because I clicked it more than once. Okay. So false ending. I'm going to leave that one in there because that one's fun. And also it was a good test to see that there's something goofy going on. Yeah. So I will figure out what's going on with this thing where things aren't synchronized. But anyway, again, everybody, Take care. See you all later.